our friend Andy Schectman, who's on the Dude Maker hotline here. Let's get right to it. Andy, how are you, brother?
What's going on, Mike? Good to hear your voice, my man. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, always. Did I have the number right? 9 billion?
10 billion. Over 10. It'll be 35 years this February.
So you sold $1 billion since you met me. See how good I am for business? You see that?
Well, I'll tell you what, man. It's been a crazy year or two. In fact, it's really been a crazy 4 years. Everything seems to be inverted and upside down these days. And I think a lot of people find a little bit of sanity in gold and silver, and that's, I guess, the most logical explanation to me.
Well, I sent you the story because someone sent it to me, and I was just wondering, I don't know if you had seen this, why are Chinese nationalists driving around with 35 gold bars in the back of their car? Did you see that?
Well, I think that's really, I did see that story, and I think that that's very concerning. You know, if you read that story, you find that one of the two gentlemen, took a flight from like China to Turkey and from Turkey to Mexico and then walked across the border with a bunch of other Chinese nationalists. And then they find him 35 ounces of gold in your pocket. You're talking, way over $100,000 right now, or over 100,000 anyway. And the point of it is that, or real damn close to it anyways, point of it is that that's very concerning. And if you realize that we've got maybe 20 million people in this country illegally, let's just pretend that 0.1% of those people have bad intentions. That's 20,000. Let's just bump it up to 5%. That's 1 million people. And when you talk about, just how scary things could actually be, that's bigger than a standing army all throughout the country. So, yeah, it is concerning. And how the hell do broke, destitute people seeking a better life pay for flights from China to Mexico, 2 or 3 of them, and then come across the border supposedly completely and totally broke, destitute, and empty-handed, only to have $100,000 in gold with them a few months later, is very concerning.
It makes you wonder what are they going to use $100,000 in gold bars for? Because that's not traceable. There's no. Here, answer a listener's question then. There's a bar of gold. Let's say one that you sell. Is there a way that can be tracked? We're not putting RFID devices in gold, are we?
No, I mean it couldn't be tracked. I guess you could say I had a client once who buried his gold underground in his backyard. He was a midnight gardener, okay. and when he had a underground sprinkler installed, the crew dug in the wrong place, found it, stole it, and brought it to a pawn shop. He had written down the bar numbers, and when he called the police and said, look, I believe that this happened, check all of the pawn shops and all of the coin shops, here are my bar numbers, they were able to put 2 and 2 together. But in general, no, that is not something that you can track. They are numbered. Some of them, most of them are, but not in a capacity to track it whatsoever.
Andy, I spent a lot of time explaining things to people here because I have 3 hours of airtime to innocently slaughter every day. And one of the things that I have spent airtime trying to explain to people is that when you go and you use your Visa card, there is no guy whose last name is Visa. When you go and use your MasterCard, there was no dude that was running around in the 60s or 70s that had the last name MasterCard. These were not companies that were set up where someone took the gold you and I were just talking about. Let's just say they were like the University of Texas back in when Obama was president. They squirreled away $3 billion in gold and various safety deposit box in New York, right? You and I talked about that story. Let's just say that they took $3 billion and they said, we're going to start a credit card company. We're going to loan you the money, and here is the money that we're going to put up, and we're going to charge you this. That's not how this works. There is this thing called a discount window. And you go to your big bank, you go to the discount window, and they give you free money, and then you can loan it out to people under the agreement that you'll pay it back at whatever the discounted interest rate is. You then mark up the interest rate, and then you take the difference, right? That's pretty much how the credit card scam works. Am I right?
Yeah, and the reason that you have interest rates so high on credit cards, obviously, is because it's an unsecured loan. And a lot of these people don't actually pay the credit card back. But yes, that is how, or that debt back. But yes, that is basically how it works. I would agree with that.
So when Trump said, I'm going to come out and we're going to give people a break and I'm going to sign an executive order, we're going to cap interest rates at 10%. You know, I had a lot of people tell me, yeah, I'll believe it when I see it. You can't do that, blah, blah, blah. Oh, yes, you can. Executive order, just don't enforce parts of Dodd-Frank. Dodd-Frank is responsible for all or most of this.
Well, you know what I find the most ironic about all of that? That's a form of price control. Yet you have the Republicans screaming, and rightfully so, that Kamala wants to impose price controls on food.
Right.
I mean, but the Republicans don't want to repeal minimum wage, yet that's a form of price control. And what is the Federal Reserve doing? But they're controlling the price of money by lowering interest rates. And so, yeah, it is something he could do, but it won't work. It won't work at all. And people say, yeah, let's do it. But what it will happen is that it will mean that many people will lose their credit cards. Because, look, you got all of these banks issuing credit cards. There's a lot of competition for it. But the reason the rates are high is because it's an unsecured loan, and a lot of these people just walk, and they don't pay back their credit card bills. So it won't work. It's the same thing as trying to cap price control, cap food. Right. Where in the 70s or the 80s, when they tried to do that last time, they were killing baby chickens. The farmers were, because the cost of raising them to full grown to slaughter it, to bring it to market, was too expensive. Same thing is true here. If Trump caps it by executive order, what's going to happen is a lot of people will lose their credit card because they will not be able to meet the criteria to get one. Right now, all you got to do is have a heartbeat, and you'll get a credit card. That's why interest rates are 22 or whatever percent. You move it down to 10% cap, you can cut that number by 2/3 those people that will qualify, if not more, for a credit card. Price controls are bad, period.
Yeah, this is then a price control. Andy Schectman of MilesFranklin.com, that is our gold and silver provider here on the Mike Church Show, with us on the Dude Maker Hotline. All right, you mentioned the Fed. This is what I really wanted to chew some fat over here. They dropped the interest at the discount window, basically, right? That's the interest rate they dropped a half a percentage point.
The federal funds rate, correct? Right. Yes, the federal funds rate.
All right. I saw someone that was on with Maria Bartiromo. I'm trying to remember which one of the talking heads it was, and I think he correctly told her like 2 months ago or a month ago when they were talking about this. You know who it was? It was my old buddy Art Laffer. And Art Laffer, and back in the 80s, you know, we had this thing called the Laffer curve, right? Which actually is correct. Sure. The Laffer curve, economically speaking, is sound. You know, we could talk about the Laffer curve for just a moment. Let me get the first question out. So as Art Laffer goes like, Maria, there is nothing in the toolbox that the Fed has that's going to rescue what's happening in this economy in the span of 90 days. It's just not going to happen. They could cut interest rate 3 points. It wouldn't matter. It's not going to happen. There's nothing. They're basically telling Congress and the administration there's nothing that we can do to bail you out at this point. You want a half a percentage point cut in the rate? Fine. We'll give you a half a percentage point. But it's not going in the short run. This will have no effect. As a matter of fact, in the short run, it looks like it might have had a deleterious effect.
Yeah, there's not a lot they can do. Basically, what he is lying about more than anything is that they have conquered their battle against inflation. They haven't done that. They're waving the white flag against inflation. The reason that they're doing this, I guess, if I had to guess anyway, is that employment is becoming a problem, that the employment numbers that they throw out are a bunch of nonsense. And I think really that's what this is that Powell knows that the numbers at the BLS, we should just take the L out of the BLS, which stands for the Bureau of Labor Statistics. They're the ones that publish the numbers on unemployment and inflation. We should pull the L out of that and just call it what it is, BS, because the U6 number is a number that they used to use prior to up through the 90s, and that number is actually really high. It's almost 8%, not the 4%, which is considered quite low by historical standards that the current measurements would portray. He knows that's a lie. Not only that, over the past year, we've seen 1.3 or 4 million jobs, full-time paying jobs that American citizens have lost and been replaced with 665,000 part-time jobs, largely by undocumented immigrants.
Right.
And so we have a situation where the unemployment numbers are really quite bad. And so I think that's the reason that he had to pivot just a little bit. And if you look at some of the comments coming out of the other Fed officials, this is something that we could see continuing for quite some time. And as a matter of fact, you have the one of the Chicago Fed presidents. I can't even pronounce the guy's name. Goolsbee, I think, is the name. That
he worked for Obama.
You know, that wouldn't surprise me.
No,
From
Austin Goolsbee was
That's
Obama's.
it.
He was Obama's chief economic advisor.
Well, there you go. And Austin says over the next 12 months, we have a long way to come down to get the interest rate something like neutral. And which is just a bunch of nonsense, really, is what it is. They are just reigniting the inflation engine at a time when stocks are at all-time highs, when real estate is higher than the 2006 peak, and, you know, supposedly we have such a strong economy. So this is just really what all politicians have done since the beginning of time, and that is to choose inflation over austerity. But the most interesting thing about the market's reaction to this was that the back end of the curve, the 10 and the 30-year, went up as soon as Powell dropped interest rates by 0.5%. That's the market's way of saying, listen, you really think we're going to hold any duration treasury when you're choosing inflation the way that you are? And for people who don't understand how much inflation is being created right now because of our brain-dead fiscal irresponsibility, U.S. government is creating $1 trillion of debt every 90 days, which works out to basically $100,000 of debt per second, 24/7. It took us 200 years to do the first trillion. We're now doing it in 90 days. And just to give you an idea of how big a trillion is, Mike, because most people don't quite get it. Because, look, if you've worked long enough, you've made $1 million. You may not have saved it, but you made it. Million, trillion, they sound alike. Trillion seconds ago was 31,688 years ago. The level of irresponsibility, the level of inflation that we are creating is off the charts. Asset prices at all-time highs. And now we're going to reignite inflation? It's the dumbest thing you can do. Ultimately sows the seeds for the demise of the dollar and the rise of countries like or organizations like the BRICS, who will challenge this system. In fact, have already come out with a new gold-backed settlement currency in principle agreed upon called the unit, which we'll find out more about on October 22nd when the BRICS meet in Russia.
Incredible stuff here from Andy Schectman, who is the president of MilesFranklin.com, our gold and silver and precious metal supplier here on the Mike Church Show. Find him online at MilesFranklin.com. Easy to find. A quick Civics 101 lesson here, and I know Andy knows this. There's so many questions I could ask you today. Art Laffer, the Laffer curve. Now, to me, Andy, and I named the daughter after President Reagan. I named her Reagan. So I'm a Reaganite. I love President Reagan, but he didn't get everything right. One of the things he got wrong was listening to Art Laffer. He should have told Art Laffer, okay, let's just assume that you're right. We're not going to go out and say that publicly because we want to cut spending. So Art Laffer's Laffer curve is what Reagan used to push through the 1981 tax cuts. You want to tell our listeners how Laffer's curve works?
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, it's something like the laws of diminishing returns.
Right.
To the if you continue to raise, at some point, if you continue to raise taxes, it ends up creating a diminished return as it stifles productivity. It stifles the economic engine, if you will.
Right.
And that's why when you listen to Trump, he talks about cutting taxes to stimulate the economy instead of spending money on taxes, which are just wasted away anyway at ridiculous fiscal irresponsibility. You lower taxes in order to stimulate the economy, to get people out there producing, to get people out there being entrepreneurs. And so, yeah, it's just basically the law of diminishing returns that, yes, higher taxes give the government more money to irresponsibly spend. But at some point, those taxes become stifling, and it starts to move in the other direction. I think that's pretty much.
No.
I don't remember it, but I'm pretty much sure that's what it is.
Well, I'm an old guy, and I do remember it. And he actually wrote a paper on it. He won an award. It wasn't a Nobel, but he won an award, a prize for it. And especially, it's a graph. And the graph shows that if you raise the nominal, what they call the nominal tax rate, if you keep raising it, you will get to a point where, okay, it's producing 100 billion, 110 billion, 130 billion, and now it's producing 120, but the rate went up. Yeah, now it's producing 110, but the rate went up. And that's because people go like, dude, bro, I'm just going to hide my money or I'm not going to use it. So that's the theory of the lever curve.
And that makes sense. It totally makes sense.
Yes.
See, that's the one thing that this government lacks, Mike, is logic. And the decisions that we make are wholly irresponsible. And this is just one of them. The Fed is trapped. They're trapped between inflation and austerity. And I guess they've given in to, and the worst part about it is that, look, there's a Fed meeting directly after the election. The fact that they're cutting 50 basis points right now, which is a pretty big cut, at least in terms of Fed speak, is in many ways political, to goose things, to goose the market leading up into the election. But yeah, it's troubling that we're going back to the inflation engine. Look, we're supposed to believe that they want a 2% inflation target, and yet even by the Fugazi CPI, which is at 3.5%, and again, if you look at the CPI, the way they used to quote it in the 80s and the 90s, just by John Williams, shadowstats.com, he'll tell you add an 8 to it. That inflation really is about 11%, not the 3%. But even if we believe the 3 1/3% or whatever that it's at, we're 65% away from their target. 65% away from their target of 2%, yet they're going to pivot because, well, everything is so great. The economy is so strong. We better pivot. Well, no, that's not true. And it's a balancing act, one that ultimately is just repeating the same story over and over and over again. This is why I tell people to own gold, Mike, not because it's not to get wealthy, because it is wealth. And through all of this nonsense, the biggest money in the world, the central banks are buying gold at a level the world has never seen before. At the same time, we supposedly have a strong dollar, positive real return, and negative outflows from the Western ETFs. In other words, this whole run-up in gold, the West has not been participating in at all. They've been selling into this rally, into a strong dollar, into positive real return, as the central banks of the world know the playbook. They know what's coming. And I think the fact that they lowered by 50 basis points tells me that the government knows that something is coming, whether it be a recession. And by the way, the two gauges for a recession, the SAM rule, as evidenced by Claudia Sam, the economist, that basically says when you have a 3-month moving average of unemployment and it moves up from its low point by over 50 basis points, you are in a recession. It's moved up by 53 basis points. It has predicted a recession 9 times in a row with 100% accuracy, or the reinversion of the yield curve, which since 1950 has predicted a recession every single time. It's reinverting. So we're probably already in a recession, and they know that's coming. So that what they're trying to do is, I suppose, soften the blow of what a slowing economy means to a debt-laden society, who will then lose the ability to efficiently service that debt. Go back to what we said on credit card bills. That's why they have rates at 22%, because this is an unsecured loan, many of which will just walk away from, won't be able to pay it. That's why if Trump tried to cap rates on credit cards, over half the people who hold a credit card would be ineligible from from keeping that card moving forward.
We only have like a minute left, Andy. If you were Andy Schectman of MilesFranklin.com, it was our gold and silver and precious metal supplier.
Come on, Mike. I need a friend. I want to talk.
Well, I'm sorry. We'll have you back sooner rather than later. I promise you.
All right.
Okay.
All right, brother.
But I do have. I can give you 2 minutes. If you were going to tell President Trump, let's just say. Schectman, you remember me? I met your father back in '95. One piece of advice, Andy. What would you tell me? If you could tell Trump one thing, President, and I believe he will be reelected. Now, does he make it to the Oval Office? I don't know. What would you tell him to do?
I would say cut spending, number one, first and foremost. Trim the fat. Cut spending. But close the military bases around the world. Bring our troops home. Protect our borders. Stimulate the country from within, stop meddling around the world. And the worst thing that he is doing or is talking, well, the worst thing that he is doing that he is talking about more than anything is the same problem that we find ourselves in administration after administration, lowering rates and dropping the value of the dollar. A weak dollar and low rates is not what this country needs, yet they all want weak rates, low rates. And by lowering the rates and weakening the dollar, all that will do is create more and more and more problems. So it would be a strong dollar, close the borders, bring home the troops, and stop meddling and stop spending. This is not just this is a spending problem at the heart of things.
Isn't it amazing that all of us had the tendency to think that Hayek and Mises and the Austrians were correct? All of us are anti-war. You and I might disagree on a myriad of things, and I think we're probably in the same wheelhouse. We all agree on the war question. All of us agree on the war question. And there's 100%. A reason why, because it squanders resources. Andy, I got to go. I got to cut it off there. Let's have you back before the election, and we'll do this again, brother. It's always great to talk to you.
You have me back anytime, Mike. It's always a pleasure. I hope you and everyone else out there stays well. And thanks for having me, buddy. Take care.
Okay, brother. That's Andy Schectman from MilesFranklin.com. So I want you to do your gold and silver business. If you're doing gold and silver, get the gold and silver from our friends at MilesFranklin.com. Yes, we are an affiliate. And, we've been an affiliate since May? Going back to April, I think. Anyway, I love talking to Andy. I don't know why I forget to have all these great guests that we have in our repertoire.